He had nowhere to go, until he found a luxurious house in the middle of the forest. Episode 2. There was never a way out. Chapter 1. The Eyes Without Light. Victor stood silently in the library doorway, his hand resting on the polished wooden frame. His smile remained warm. His eyes did not. They reflected no light at all, only an endless darkness that seemed to swallow the room. Ethan instinctively hid Jonathan Hale's diary behind his back. Victor took a slow step forward. "You've been exploring." It wasn't a question. I was just looking for something to read," Ethan replied, forcing a nervous smile. Victor's expression never changed. "The library contains over 10,000 books. So why choose the one that was hidden?" Silence filled the room. Then, unexpectedly, Victor chuckled. "It doesn't matter. Every guest becomes curious." He extended his hand. "Dinner is ready." Ethan reluctantly followed, but as he left the library, he slipped Jonathan's diary beneath his jacket without Victor noticing. Or so he hoped. Chapter 2. The forest has no exit. The next morning, Ethan decided he had seen enough. While Victor prepared breakfast, Ethan quietly packed his backpack and slipped out through the front gate. "I'm leaving," he whispered. The forest was bright beneath the morning sun. Birds chirped. The air smelled fresh. Everything felt normal. He walked for nearly 3 hours. Eventually, he reached an old gravel road. Relieved, he followed it until the trees began to thin. Then, he stopped. Standing before him was the mansion. The same marble staircase. The same fountains. The same iron gate. His footprints still marked the wet stone path from earlier that morning. Confused, Ethan tried another direction. Hours passed. Again, the mansion appeared. He climbed a rocky hill. The mansion waited below. He crossed a shallow river. The mansion stood on the opposite bank. Panic took over. He ran. Branches tore at his clothes. His lungs burned. He didn't stop until sunset, when he finally collapsed from exhaustion. The mansion stood directly in front of him, its lights glowing warmly in the darkness. The front door slowly opened. Victor stood there, smiling. I was beginning to worry. Chapter 3. The Hidden Basement. That night Ethan couldn't sleep. Jonathan's diary replayed in his mind. The forest doesn't let anyone leave. Around midnight, he noticed Victor carrying an old brass lantern toward a staircase Ethan had never seen before. Curiosity overcame fear. Keeping a safe distance, Ethan followed him. The staircase descended deep beneath the mansion. The air grew colder with every step. At the bottom stood a massive iron door. Victor unlocked it with an antique silver key. As the door opened, a wave of icy air rushed into the corridor. Ethan waited until Victor disappeared inside. Then he quietly approached. Looking through the narrow opening, his heart nearly stopped. The basement wasn't filled with wine or storage. It was a museum. Hundreds of portraits covered every wall. Each painting looked incredibly realistic. Each had a small brass plaque beneath it. Jonathan Hale, 1987. Margaret Ellis, 1962. Samuel Brooks, 1941. Rebecca Collins, 1915. There were dozens. No, hundreds. Every portrait showed someone smiling peacefully, exactly as they had looked while alive. Then Ethan noticed something impossible. At the far end of the room, An empty golden frame. A freshly engraved plaque beneath it read, "Ethan Walker." The date of arrival was already carved. The date of death had been left blank. Chapter 4. The woman behind the mirror. Terrified, Ethan backed away. His shoulder struck an old standing mirror, instead of his own reflection. He saw a young woman wearing a faded white dress. She wasn't behind him. She was inside the mirror. She desperately pressed her hand against the glass. Her lips moved silently. Ethan stepped closer. Suddenly, he heard her voice, not with his ears, but inside his mind. "Victor isn't the owner. He's only the caretaker. The house is alive. It chooses people who have nowhere left to go. If it claims your name, you'll never leave." Before Ethan could ask another question, the mirror cracked from top to bottom with a deafening snap. The woman's reflection disappeared. A cold voice echoed through the basement. "You've seen too much." Ethan slowly turned. Victor stood at the bottom of the stairs. His smile was gone. For the first time since Ethan had arrived, Victor looked afraid. Not of Ethan, but of the house itself. Behind Victor, every chandelier in the basement went dark. Then, a deep, thunderous heartbeat echoed through the walls. Boom, boom, boom. The mansion, Chapter 5, was waking up. The truth about the house. The heartbeat echoed through the basement. Boom, boom. Dust rained from the ceiling. The walls trembled as if something enormous had awakened beneath the mansion. Victor grabbed Ethan by the arm. "We have to leave. Now." "You said the house was alive," Ethan said, pulling away. "What is this place?" Victor looked toward the dark hallway, his face pale. "I wasn't lying when I said I was only the caretaker. I arrived here 112 years ago." Ethan stared at him. Victor continued, "I was 28 years old when I became lost in this forest. Just like you. The house welcomed me. It gave me food, warmth, and a second chance. I tried to leave. I couldn't. So I accepted its offer." "What offer?" Victor lowered his eyes. "To care for the house. In return, it stopped me from growing old." "You've been here for over a century?" Victor nodded slowly. "The portraits aren't decorations. They're everyone the house has claimed. The house feeds on hopeless souls, people with nothing left in the outside world. It gives them comfort until they willingly stop trying to leave. And once they surrender, the house keeps them forever." Chapter 6. The Heart Beneath the Mansion. Victor led Ethan through a hidden passage behind the basement portraits. The tunnel descended deep into the earth. The air became warmer. The heartbeat grew louder. Finally, they entered an enormous underground chamber. In the center stood a massive tree unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Its bark was black as charcoal. Its branches disappeared into the ceiling, somehow supporting the entire mansion above. Instead of fruit, hundreds of glowing human hearts hung from its branches. Each one beat slowly. Each carried a tiny brass nameplate. Jonathan Hale, Rebecca Collins, Samuel Brooks, Margaret Ellis. Every guest the house had ever taken. Near the highest branch, one heart had only just begun to glow. The nameplate read, "Ethan Walker." "It hasn't claimed you completely yet," Victor whispered. "If that heart fully awakens, you'll become part of this place forever." Chapter 7. One Impossible Choice. The ground shook violently. Dark roots burst from the floor, wrapping around Ethan's ankles. The mansion had made its choice. The tree wanted its newest guest. Victor stepped forward. No. The roots ignored him. They climbed higher around Ethan's legs. His heart began beating in perfect rhythm with the giant tree. Victor closed his eyes. I made a promise long ago. I would protect the next person who still had hope. Before Ethan could stop him, Victor walked toward the tree. He placed both hands against its trunk. The entire chamber exploded with golden light. The roots released Ethan immediately. Instead, they wrapped themselves around Victor. The old caretaker smiled one last time. I've served long enough. It's someone else's turn to live. The roots pulled Victor into the tree. Within seconds, he vanished. The heartbeat stopped. Every glowing heart hanging from the branches slowly faded. One by one, they dissolved into tiny lights that floated upward like thousands of fireflies. For the first time in centuries, the house fell silent. Chapter 8. The Last Road. Ethan awoke lying beside the same abandoned highway where his journey had begun. The morning sun warmed his face. The storm was gone. His backpack rested beside him. His phone suddenly powered on by itself. A passing truck stopped. "You all right?" the driver asked. "You look like you've been lost for days." Ethan looked toward the forest. There was no mansion, no gate, no fountain, only endless trees. Weeks later, his life slowly began to recover. He found a new job, rented a small apartment, started over. Sometimes he wondered if the mansion had only been a nightmare, until one rainy evening, while unpacking an old box, he found something he had never taken from the forest. Jonathan Hale's diary. Inside was a new page that hadn't been there before. Written in fresh black ink were 6 chilling words. "Thank you for setting us free." Ethan smiled for the first time in weeks. Then he noticed one final sentence appearing beneath it. The ink slowly wrote itself across the page. "But another house is already waiting." Outside his apartment window, far beyond the city lights, a single golden light flickered deep inside a distant forest. The end.